What's up, everybody? This is Corwin Allen with indiehackers.com, and you are watching Indie Hackers Office Hours, or in this particular case, an Indie Hackers AMA with Allie LeFevere. Allie, how's it going?
I'm so good. How are you?
I am doing excellent. Let me unpin my video so we can see you here. So, Allie, you are the founder of Obedient Agency. You guys do branding and marketing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys do?
Yeah, we are a branding agency that uses fun and humor to get brands in the spotlight. So we believe that there is a more positive, more enjoyable, more relatable, equally effective way to talk about your brand, to market your brand, to showcase your brand. That is an excellent experience for both yourself as the creator and also your consumers. And so that's what we do. We built an entire agency around the idea that fun sells, and that's it.
Fun sells. Okay, so what we've done is we have done an Ask Me Anything post on the Indie Hackers forum, where people have come in and for the last couple of weeks put down some branding and marketing questions for you. And what I'm going to do is read these questions to you and see how it goes. And I have not pre-read any of these questions. I have no idea what people asked. So let's get to it. Let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
All right. We're going to go straight from top to bottom. So to begin with, Rosie Sherry, our excellent community manager at Indie Hackers, who has run her own community and grown it to 7 figures, starts off with the first question. She says, Allie, what would you say are the most important brand factors for Indie Hackers to focus on in the early stages of their business when they likely have very little money?
Yeah, so there's obviously a million different aspects of your business that we could talk about. Everything from infrastructure, operations, finances, all of that. But I will focus on the branding and marketing element because that's my jam. I think one of the biggest things, if I were to think of all the things we do for clients, I think the most important thing we do is actually a bit behind the scenes, and it's something that we start on the back end working on, and it eventually ends up on the front end of a consumer's business, and that is developing a brand's point of differentiation. So what I mean by that is when we are first working with a brand, we are looking at their audience, their goals, their industry. We're looking at all the things they say about their brand, all the things they say about what they do, why they're interesting, why they're different, why they're memorable, and we really try to pluck out and extract what is really true and real in that. What is the thing that will help build notoriety? What is the thing that you can say about your business?
Alert from Google Chrome.
Sorry. That I just turned off my notifications. That you can say about your business that truly is different than what anyone else is doing in the market. Are you offering your product or service in a unique way? And it often is, unfortunately, very different. What we come up with is very different than what our client thinks it is. Because I think what often happens is that it's so new and fresh and different to you as a business owner that you think you're bringing some new compelling aspect of your business to the forefront, but it doesn't always tend to be. So that's a big piece we work on for a significant amount of time, is like, what is different about what you do and how do we bring that to the surface? And then we turn that into something we call a hook. And so how do we say that in a way that is memorable, engaging, interesting, different, compelling? So it's identifying it, and then it's talking about it, because that becomes your through line, and that should be the thing that is one of the foundational aspects of your business that you build all the other stuff on top of. So when you're talking about all the other features and benefits, they should all be stacked on top of that centralized, really unique, different thing. And I think that if people really got that right, not only would the external, the external presence of your brand look really different, it would and be really cohesive and interesting and memorable, all of those things, but also would feel better intrinsically as a business owner, because you know what you stand for, you know what you're about, and you know what matters.
That makes so much sense. That I think it's easier to put it that way. Everything sort of flows from this one statement that you create, and then from there you can sort of figure everything out. How do you craft that statement? You talked about really identifying what differentiates your business and how sometimes founders aren't able to accurately figure that out because they're too much in the trenches. They think that everything they're doing is new, but really not everything will resonate with an audience.
Yeah.
What do you guys bring to the table? What should Indie Hackers know about how they can avoid making that mistake? Like, how do you do a better job at that than the average business person?
Yeah, I think, collectively as a team, we've been myself and my co-founder have both been doing this for 10 plus years. Everyone on our team is a seasoned vet in creative ideation and branding and marketing. I think that what we're often doing, even to start, is that we're gathering a different type of intel. A lot of times people are looking at like demographic data, and they're looking at a lot of features of a business. And we care more about your consumer emotions, your audience psyche, and another element that for us is just really important is we care a lot about again, consumer emotions, audience psyche, and we care more about the benefits than the features. So I think people get caught up in like the cool shiny things your product or service does, as opposed to saying like, how is it of value to your consumer? How is it going to impact their life? What truly can you offer that no one else can? And so because we spend so much time there, I think we're able to tell better stories and
Mm.
be able to really craft a different message around it. The thing that we can't really teach is that we are, it's just really the creativity element is that we are, I think collectively as a team, we have backgrounds in just creative writing and comedy and all of those more topical surface elements, but it's the core way of thinking that I think hopefully I want your audience to start to think about your business different, because I think that when you bring a new fresh perspective and you start asking different questions, you get better answers and better results. So hopefully that helps.
It's a good point, because I think for a lot of indie hackers, we're developers. We're the ones actually building the product from the ground up. And
Yeah.
it's very hard not to get sucked into this trap of the features and what matter. It's always about the features. And so we describe our products to people by saying like, oh, we've got, this type of API and we allow you to do this particular thing. And it's like, yeah, but no one really identifies with that stuff, right? Like, what
Yeah.
is the actual value you're bringing? And it's one of the most common problems is differentiating yourself and describing what you do, and not just by listing out your features.
Yeah. And it's just this idea of like, okay, so what? Like just, okay, you have all that cool shiny stuff. So what? Like, what does it matter? Not why does it matter to you as the builder of the thing, but why does it matter to me as the consumer of the thing? And I think when you really start to understand that, I think you get to a better place.
So can you give me an example of someone who's got like a good hook, a good tagline that really demonstrates to consumers what that value is, rather than just saying a feature or like something they don't care about?
Yeah. So a new one that we just came across that we really, really liked is the dating app Hinge. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not.
I
But
am.
so Hinge is, they initially, I think, tried to position themselves as the relationship app, right? Is they asked really good. I mean, I'm not on it in particular, not on it, but I know from friends who are. But they would ask really good questions that help facilitate dialogue and really wanting people to make connections. So the connection app, the relationship app. What they came out with recently, which is I think is a really strong point of differentiation, and they wrapped it in a really strong hook, is their core tagline now, which is their hook. It's that catchy, memorable soundbite of like really what they do and what they believe is designed to be deleted. So what they realized is they had a product that already was fostering these really great communication and connection and they were starting to see a trend of their platform. A lot of people were more quickly moving from online to offline in terms of actually meeting and connecting with the people on Hinge. And so they decided, you know what, instead of trying to keep people on our platform longer, like the thing that's really sexy and cool and unique about us is that we want you to delete our app. We don't want you to be on here forever. We're so good and we've created a product that can be so successful that we've designed it so it'll eventually be deleted from your life, because you're going to, in theory, meet someone on here and you won't need us anymore. And so that's their point of differentiation wrapped in a really sexy hook designed to be deleted. And that has become now their campaign that is it was an email newsletter. It was in their email newsletter. It's a social campaign now. It's on billboards. It's on their website. So it's been really cool to see that concept become the through line through everything they're doing.
Great example. We're going to move on to another question from another
Yep.
founder. His name is Soluxo, so I have a feeling I'm going to ask a few questions from him because he posted like 8 questions. The first is, what are the worst marketing approaches you're seeing from marketers nowadays that everyone should avoid? What are we doing wrong here?
Yeah. few off the top of my head. People are too long-winded in their marketing, meaning that you're saying 10,000 words to explain something that could, in theory, be distilled down to 10 really, really smart and clever and good and interesting ones. And the problem with that is because most people aren't consuming information in long form. And also, when you're clouding your main point of what you're trying to convey to your audience with all this other copy and text, you tend to lose the thread of like, what am I supposed to take away from this? What matters? What's important? What's interesting? What do I need to know? So that's one. I think we're seeing a lot of recycled copy, a lot of recycled. People are on, especially on social, you see this where they're just reposting what everyone else is posting because, the joke landed one time or it was shared by one big company once. And so now they're stealing it and re-saying it for their own brand. Like, I'm trying to give a good example, like not this, but sort of something like, but first coffee. And now it's, but first oat milk, but first lipstick, but first, but like everyone is just taking like the same framework and they're reusing it. So it's no longer interesting. It's no longer new. It's no longer fresh. And it often doesn't work with a brand. So they're trying to shove a thing that was once cool and interesting into their brand and make it work. And then the third thing is people using really fear to convert an audience. And I want to separate what I mean by fear versus understanding someone's needs. So you have to understand what someone needs and what someone wants to hear in order to compel them to take action. But I think too often people think that there's only one way to capitalize on that, and that is to make people feel inadequate, make people feel insecure, make people feel frustrated, and just really, instead of helping solve for those pain points, it's just digging into them further until they feel like you're the only solution. And I think that, yes, it works. I will commend that style for working, but it doesn't feel good. And it isn't really a long-term solution, because when you're just playing to, when you're trying to just fill the hole inside a consumer, there will eventually be a point where your product no longer fills that void because you were never really filling it in the first place, and they will just move on to someone else. It doesn't allow for brand loyalty and really retention, and in the same way that a message that is compelling for more positive, energizing reasons would. So those are three things I think are just pretty common that are out there that I'm not a huge fan of, but they do work. I just think that there's a better way to do it.
So your company focuses on injecting humor into the marketing and branding process, which is, I guess, the opposite of what you said not to do, injecting fear into everything, which doesn't particularly work that well. We've got a question here from DDX. He asks, have you seen successful examples of using humor to market luxury brands? Does it work there? Do you recommend it? And if it does work, why does it work? If it doesn't work, why not?
Yeah, I mean, I think first, before answering that, I want to step back and just clarify fun and humor. So fun and humor is a very broad range in terms of tones and tactics you can apply to your branding. So fun and humor is not just slapstick, silly jokes, punchy one-liners. Fun and humor, as we see it, can be very clever, very witty, very dry, very bold, very sleek. It can be a million different shades. So it's really, really important to understand your audience so you understand what style will resonate with them, because every style elicits a different reaction in your consumer. So I'll answer the second part of that question first, is that I think if you use the right style, the right tone and right tones and tactics, it can work for any industry. I mean, we are currently working with an MS organization. We're working with a research study right now to help more folks get involved in a research process. So there is a way to infuse some style of fun and humor and levity into the branding and marketing of your business. One company I think that does it well, and they do it very subtly, and they don't do it everywhere, but when they do it, it works, is Goop. They rolled out a vitamin line, and Goop is just known for being notoriously upscale. Their price points are very high on the products they recommend. They're a lifestyle company, so they're doing everything from travel to products. And they have a vitamin line, and one of the vitamins off the top of my head I can think of is called Why Am I So Effing Tired? And I think it worked really well because it was very direct, it was very bold, it wasn't apologetic, it spoke to their target consumer. So because they knew their audience, they knew that they could use that type of style that would still elicit and evoke the same response and reaction. So that's just one I can think of off the top of my head. You don't see it as much in the luxury brands for the most part, and I don't think it's because it can't be done. I think that it's just fun and humor is. I think it's tough to do, but it's also something that it takes exploration to really understand like what works for you. And so a lot of people just that's just not the road they walk. But hopefully more.
It's a
Hopefully we'll
good
see.
example. Goop is a great example. It sounds
Yeah.
like in their humor, they weren't exactly, they might be a luxury brand because their stuff is expensive, but it sounds like in their humor, they weren't like making jokes that were targeted at a luxury item, like audience. It seemed like sort of a
Mhm.
broad millennial-esque joke.
Exactly.
Cool. So the same person, DDX, asks as well the same question, but in social good brand. So if you're trying to do something for social good, how might you go about injecting humor or fun to market? And that seems like a tricky one because like you might be dealing with very serious problems, homelessness or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think that I actually think it's a really nice, it's, a nice thing to apply to social good brands. We've actually worked with quite a few. And I think it works so well is because often there's a lot of fear and guilt or more guilt associated with social good brands, like just really wanting to compel your audience to take action and to contribute. And it often is rightfully so wanting to tap into that generous, socially compelled spirit within someone. But a lot of times guilt is the tactic that's used to get there. And um, and I think often too is that we are so just inundated with a lot of heavy topics all the time. So I think the beauty of levity and the beauty of fun or some lightness to an experience is that it it can be a way to disarm your audience in a good way. So we can talk about a difficult topic and it doesn't have to feel difficult to learn about. We can navigate a an illness or a social cause and it doesn't have to make me feel bad or uncomfortable in the process necessarily. Like I can lean into it more. I want it, so it allows for curiosity, it allows to you to humanize an experience, it allows you to bring lightness to something without making light of it if it's done right, right? And I think the way it can be done right is if you're telling the truth. um, we always say that humor is just the truth having fun. And I think that that's a really beautiful part of humor and fun is that it should be truthful. It should be something people relate to and recognize and can say, hey, that's me, or I understand that, or I get that, or I resonate with that. And so I think that that's like a really fun way to leverage it. Like for example, we have a fertility client that we work with. We have and like I said, an MS organization. We have done work with Bloodwater, and we did a whole campaign called Game of Thrones, and it was but the whole campaign was about building latrines in an underserved areas. And so it was a charitable drive. They were raising money in order to build latrines, and so we thought, okay, well, let's make this, let's gamify this a bit, let's make it entertaining, and because this is our exciting cause, and let's generate some fun buzz around it. So yeah, there's definitely a way to do it that is respectful and also gets people and more energized to participate.
So this seems, first of all, it's really cool that there is a way to do it. It
Yeah.
seems tricky and difficult. So Rodrigo asks, when is it too much? When is it too much to do fun and humor? And I think more broadly, like I'd also like to ask, like, how do you do it? Like, what if you're not an expert at using humor? What if you're not a fun person? How do you make sure that you're doing this in a way that's not going to offend people, that's not going to fall flat?
Yeah. Well, I think to answer your first question, when is too much, everything should always be intentional. So there should be a reason why you are doing something cheeky or interesting or clever on packaging or on a sales page or on email copy. There should be some, you want your consumer to take some action, you want them to remember something, you want them to further explore something. Just have, and I feel like that is whether it's funny or not, or interesting or not, or entertaining or not, it should all be intentional. So just the idea I kind of mentioned at the beginning is that you should be able to distill your message down to a handful of really compelling points. So I think getting clear on what it is you want to say or talk about or compel your audience to do or remember is really, really important. So fun and humor to me should be used when it's necessary and when it's going to, drive some action, right? I think it can be used everywhere, but like not just for the sake of it. So it should be just done strategically. It's hard for me to give specific answers without like looking at a business and dissecting it and saying like, oh, this would be cool here, or I could see something here. The second question you asked was, oh, if you're not particularly funny. I so two things. I think the first is if you are I'm going to separate out personal brands from brands who are, not attached to a person, right?
Mm.
If your brand is not you, it doesn't really matter what you resonate with. It matters what your audience resonates with. Meaning that it's less about what you find funny and you find interesting and you find entertaining, and more that this is the audience I want to attract and the audience who I know is consuming my stuff, and I want to cultivate something and create something that matters to them. It's going to resonate with them. It's going to elicit something from them. So I think that that's really important. Is you have to take yourself out of the equation. Because even like obedient, I have a certain humor style, things I think are particularly funny, but it's not woven into everything I do all the time. I tend to like a little bit sillier, hyperbolic. I like asides. I like parentheticals. Like that tends to be, I like that more than just punch, punch, punch. Like that's not my personal style, but I know punch, punch, punch and just bold statement can be really effective. And so we use that too, right? So I flex into that when I know it's going to resonate with the audience. So when it comes to a personal brand, I think that it becomes a little bit more challenging because it ultimately has to be a reflection of who you are as a person, right? So you don't want it to feel inauthentic. You don't want it to be out of integrity. It has to be in alignment with who you are, because you can't put on a facade and expect people to relate to it. So I think like as opposed to getting caught up in fun and humor so much is like the execution of it. I would spend more time thinking about what am I saying that is different, that is fresh, that is new, that people haven't heard before, and really get that part right. Like get your approach right, your perspective right, like what sets you apart. Because I think like it isn't something that I think, we could help, if we were doing a training, we could probably get people a little bit better at being creative and fun and humorous, but it's just an inherent skill set. Like there are some people that are really wonderful painters and they're not going to be Monet. They might be able to paint a painting that they'll put in their bedroom, but they might not want to put it on a billboard, right? So I think when it comes to personal branding, I think the most important thing is, as opposed to getting caught up in like the external, experience, is really understanding like how do you approach your own business from an unorthodox perspective, is asking better questions, thinking about things in a fresh, new, different way.
Cool. So you kind of answered Rodrigo's second question as well, which is, how do you decide if you want fun and humor in your brand? Is it just something that you should do if it's your personality, or is it dependent on your target audience and customers? And your answer is kind of that it's both, right? You've got to be a little bit true to yourself, but you also have to judge the situation and decide like what kind of jokes do your audience like, right? What fits in well with the situation.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like a lot of it does come down to like your personal, a lot of nuance, a lot of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
There's always the person who makes like the really bad, inappropriate joke at the party, and it's like that person just isn't necessarily an expert on when to use humor and how to use it effectively. And maybe you have to know that about yourself if you're going to do that with your brand.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, because that's the thing. It's like how we expect each other as human beings to have like good social awareness. It's like you have to have good brand awareness too. Is the thing that you think is good and interesting doesn't necessarily mean it's good and interesting for your consumers. And I think there has to be a willingness to kill your darlings or kill the things that you personally are drawn and attracted to. And I mean, I do think fun and humor can work in every business. I think the difference is it is a bit different from personal and, if you're building a business outside of yourself, but also, the actual, I'm just not a big, like if I'm not good at something, I'm going to maybe try it, And then if I feel like it's not effective, I'm going to bring in expertise, right? So I think part of it is like, you don't have to put the pressure. I'm not even saying to hire people like to us particularly, but like, if you're not great at some element of your brand and you're pretty good at all the other stuff, then be pretty good at the other stuff and bring in someone to nail the thing that you're not great at, right? So maybe that's design, maybe that's branding, maybe that's your accounting, like whatever that thing is that you just can't seem to get right. DIYing it to us is like, sounds like dying for a reason. It's like, that's a really quick way to kill your brand, is if you keep thinking you can do something for it that you really don't have the skill set for. Like I said, I think the thing everyone can do is learn to think differently about their business. And I think that's really important, to just bring that, just like that new, different lens to your business.
Okay, so we're gonna move into some more generic marketing questions that aren't necessarily humor focused, but feel free to
Okay.
talk about humor. We're going back to Luxos. I hope I'm saying his username right. He asks, what are your biggest marketing tips for somebody just getting started, like a brand new marketer or a brand new founder who's suddenly thrust into this position where they have to learn how to market this thing, and perhaps beforehand they were just a software engineer?
Mm, I mean, I kind of would almost circle back to the very first answer I answered, which is like getting your hook right, getting your point of differentiation right. I know that, like that's more internal versus marketing, but that's the thing that's going to affect all your marketing. From a, I think, and I think this leads to my second part of the answer is like, have a cohesive experience. Like the thing, no matter how, okay, so if you're coming into the market for the first time, and let's say I'm your consumer, what matters to me equally as much, whether you have like the best branding and marketing or a mediocre branding and marketing, is that I have a cohesive experience through everything. And what I mean by that is that when we are, so like as humans, when we're trying to get to know each other, consistency and cohesiveness is really important in building trust, because I want to know I'm going to get the same version of you every time. Like that's how I start to warm up to you and open up to you and like you more, is like, oh, I know what Cortland's personality is like, and I really like that about him. And it doesn't matter if Cortland's the funniest guy in the whole planet, or he's, pretty dry in his delivery, or whatever that part of you is like, what I start to like more about you is the cohesion in your character and your personality. So something else I think is really important is not just that you're landing and you're nailing your branding and marketing and creative, but like when you're working on it, you're thinking of it as a big picture, just a big picture perspective, is that every touch point of your brand should be a consistent consumer experience. Because if it's not, it will immediately you will immediately start to lose trust in your audience. They won't know and understand you. And if someone can't know and understand you, they will not like you, they will not trust you, will not remember you, and they will not come back to you. So that is something I think is really important. From a pure tactical standpoint, I think you have to do a little bit of trial and error, like see if your product or your service has a viable audience, have some sort of inner circle. Like you guys are lucky you have the indie hackers that start to like, maybe you have a beta run where some people are testing out your product and service. Like, is it good? Does it need improvement? Are people interested in it? So you need to you can't just put lipstick on a pig. You have to have a good product or service that you're going to offer. I mean, before we formed Obedient, I was running my own company. My co-founder, who's my best friend, she was running her own company. And we started to partner up on projects together to see if this new concept and this new idea had legs. And so we were starting to pitch to our current clients to say, hey, would you be willing to try this new thing out and give us feedback along the way? And like, what, does this work for you? Is this effective? All of these things. And so that's what we did, that for a little while, and started to realize, oh, like we really have a thing here. We had to test it out first. We couldn't just go like, oh yeah, we think we know this thing is going to kill and it might not, So I think that's important too.
There's a lot of good stuff here. There's like so much I want to talk about there, because even the last thing that you were talking about, like having your product actually live up to your marketing, like that's product market fit. If you have a message that resonates with a particular market of people and they love it, but then they use your product and it's different, then like your product doesn't fit your market. But at the same time, if you have like a product that you think is great, but you don't know who your target customer is or what resonates, like they're never going to use it, because like why would they? There's a million things coming out to them every day 100 books they could read, 100 video games they could play, videos they could watch. Like, if you don't have something to call them in, like, why would they? And I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest challenges for indie hackers is a lot of people are building stuff without a target customer in mind. Like, how could you possibly develop a hook and figure out, what you can say about what you're building and how it's going to resonate with someone if you don't even have an image in mind of what that person looks like or why they would care?
Yeah, and it's super important. I'm glad you brought that up because I think like you should be building your product and service to serve an audience. It should be something people want. And if you don't know who you're talking to, you can't possibly be saying the right things. So that's a really important thing too. Doesn't mean you have to get it perfectly right out the gate. I mean, you will start to your audience will shift and grow and expand and shrink and all those things, but you have to have some idea of who might be interested in what you're doing. It's another thing when we're working with folks is sometimes they come to us and they think they are really clear on their audience. And as we start to, ask better questions and poke and prod and talk about their product and we're like, I don't actually think these people are going to resonate with this message, but these people are the people that you're really not paying attention to. These people will really like it. So I think it's, again, like being really honest with yourself and like doing some due diligence and work up front. Everyone
Yeah.
wants to just be an entrepreneur and build a business and be like, there, I did it. But it takes work and it takes a willingness to pivot and be flexible. And that'll give you shelf life in a business is if you're willing to not have all the answers to start.
So I've got a question of my own.
Yeah.
This process that you're going through, you're working with businesses. They might already have, they definitely already have some sort of product. They probably have some sort of message and an idea in mind of who their target audience is. And I think it's hard because it's like three different variables, all of which can change. Like you were saying, they might have a message and it might be a good message, but they have the wrong customer. Or maybe they have like the right customer, just a bad message. What's your process look like for figuring out which one of those is the case and what to change? And the reason I ask this is because as an indie hacker, if you're building your own product, like it takes a long time to code a product. It takes weeks, months, sometimes years to change what you're building, but you can change your marketing message in a matter of seconds. You can change the customers you're targeting in maybe a few days or weeks or just hours or something. So oftentimes that's easier to change. How do you figure out, you know, which marketing messages resonate? Are you just doing tests? Are you guessing? There's like a checklist that you run through?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty robust process. When we are, gosh, so we're gathering a lot of intel to start. And then we're talking with our clients, we're doing video chats and really getting to know them and their product or their service. Um, Oftentimes, the biggest factor, so we're looking at industry, we're looking at audience goals, kind of the whole shebang, is that what they're creating, what is that unique different thing about it? And so that almost becomes the star of the show to some degree, saying okay, if this is the product we're working with and we want to sell this product, who and and in order to do that, we have to find that really different nuanced thing that's going to build you notoriety around this thing. Is we start to think, okay, here's this audience data that you're giving us, and then we're using other intel and all that to start to say like, maybe we think your audience is a little bit different. And if it is, how do we have to talk to them? Because the second layer that we do is after we really develop that hook is we're building your personality, we're building your brand personality. And so essentially what that is the qualities and characteristics, the tones and tactics we're using in order to draw in that audience, because we want to elicit and evoke a certain response from a particular audience, right? So if the star of the show is the product or service, then we know that we have to, and we're sometimes I would say it's educated guessing. I wouldn't say it's just blind guessing. We're going to start to shape a voice and a tone in a way that's going to draw in that audience. And that's where you do a little bit of beta testing, is that we start to go, okay, this is your core personality, but here are some elements of your personality that we really want to flex and try maybe on social. Maybe we want to try in email marketing to see if what's resonating, because as we start to maybe flex in different directions, we'll start to see like what's landing or what are people responding to. And I think that helps us further clarify the audience and clarify the message. And so I don't know if there's it's like a chicken versus egg. We're kind of working with everything to start, but I think we can only start with where the client based on what the audience or information rather that we're gathering from the client. So we're starting there, and then we can always flex and grow and pivot and shift from there. But we generally start somewhere, and it tends to be like the hero product to some degree.
It's interesting hearing how this process is so similar for a bigger company as it might be to like an indie hacker. If you're a tiny one-person startup, it's the same thing. Like you need to talk to your customers and experiment and see what's going to resonate.
100%.
And like I was hinting at earlier, like it's just so easy as a founder to default to, oh, my product's not selling, it's not resonating, I guess I need to go back to the drawing board and spend 6 months coding. But like if you haven't actually tried out different messages to see what resonates and like tested that out, which could maybe only take like, I don't know, how long does it take you to do that process?
Really depends. I mean, there's some that we have a million ideas for a client, and we just
Mhm.
keep test out 20 different styles. So we're like overflowing with ideas, and some it's a tough product and in a really saturated market. And so it's like we're less than maybe core messages. We're trying to test out like tones and tactics and maybe styles. And so, I mean, process on average about 6 weeks ish.
Okay.
But like phase one, like round one to get it to testability. And then from there we start to tweak. But
Still significantly faster than rebuilding your product from from
yeah,
scratch.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm also curious, like, what kind of results do you see? Like, if you try out, I don't know, 5 different, messages or hooks with people, do you see some that are like, is it like, just what's the variance? Is it like, are they like 5% better, like 10% better? Do you see some things that are just like, 100 times better? Like, how much bang do you expect to get for your buck if you have a really good marketing hook?
Yeah. I mean, so we're really testing out one hook at a time. And to be honest, and I don't even say this to toot our own horn, it is very rare that the hook changes too much. Sometimes the way we present the hook in terms of the actual creative that shifts, but the hook usually stays pretty stable, meaning like that core foundational idea of what makes you unique and different tends to be we tend to get to we tend to be able to land on that pretty easily. Well, not easily, but pretty accurately. The creative tends to change. So, like we're running different campaigns or ads or web copy. I mean, God, in terms, I wish I had numbers I can think of off the top of my head, but like we might test out, for example, 2 different email campaigns as like I'll give you like a small example, and open rate on one might be somewhere 12%, right? We're going to try one style, one approach. We might be flexing in one direction with like the brand personality. And then we might do another, and we're up to 30 to 35% because something was it just landed. We talked about it in a way that was just more catchy, or was maybe like more surprising, or more lack familiarity, so people were more apt to click on it. So it really does depend, but I think again it's just hard to say like, oh, this thing works every time, because the thing that works every time only works when it's surprising, and it only works when it's fresh, and it only works when it's new. It's hard to just keep recycling stuff, because at some point it won't be new anymore. So and then again it keeps tailoring to your audience. And so yeah, it's just a trial and error process.
So I've got one more question from Soluxos. He
Okay.
asks, so he's got a selfish question regarding his own startup. So
Okay.
I'm putting you in the spot here. If you had to market a book club discussion website, so people are discussing books apparently, where would you start? Where would you focus your efforts? And I guess based on our conversation so far, like, the answer is some sort of hook that differentiates them. This is a website for discussing books. How do you differentiate yourself in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely, I think I would want to understand like who am I trying to draw in? Because how I would like the value of that book club would, and the hook of that book club, the thing that would be different would matter very much based on the audience. So like, is it for moms? Is it for women? Is it for people to have political dialogue? Is it a catch-all for everyone? Is it for kids? You're going to say something very, very different. So I think in that case, I think having a pretty clear idea of who your audience is a good place to start. And then how do you message it? Like what would be, so some questions I would maybe have you ask yourself, like, what is something they've never heard before? What is something that they really need to feel? What is something that, what is a promise they've been made for other book clubs that has not been delivered on? What is, even weird questions like, what is the first thing they do when they wake up in the morning? Like, just to get a sense of like, what is your consumer like? What's the last thing they think about before they go to bed? What need could your book club fill? Sorry, I'm just like riffing off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
where are these questions coming from? Like, what's the
I don't know.
common thread?
The common thread is I just want to understand the emotional experience of your consumer. I think like
Okay.
that is the thing that really matters to me, because ultimately, as much as people think they're practical and they're pragmatic, people are emotional, and that even if their emotional responses and reactions are rooted in, in logic, there's still an emotional reaction to some degree. I'm very pragmatic of a person, but I'm still reacting to something, right? I'm to a feeling I have, to an instinct, whatever that is. So I think really tapping into your consumer's emotions and like whatever you're creating, how are you going, like what need are you going to fill? What promise can you keep? What are you going to make your audience feel that no one else can? What is something that how have they been wronged or let down before, and how are you going to solve for that? And then really start to your solution, your point of differentiation. Just start to think about the benefit you provide. Not the features. It's not like, oh, we have a cool button where you can subscribe in one click. Yeah, that's cool. But like ultimately, it's like, what are you creating that's of benefit to your consumer, and like really start to understand that. So that's where I'd start.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep going in this direction because
Yeah,
I
go for it.
clicked over to this book website and I realized I know the founder. He's been on an office hours call before. It's Callum. His website is Bookerino, and it says, "Hey there, we're an online book club currently reading startup books." And
Okay.
so I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, is that a good tagline when I show up to a website? Is that a good hook? Is that too dry?
Currently reading startup books. So the way, just my gut instinct, Callum, is that his name?
Callum is his name.
Callum. So Callum, okay. The first thing I would say, without spending any time on your business, is make the statement about your audience, not about what you're doing. What do they need? If you are an X that wants to learn X, like that's not interesting or compelling, but like talk about them before you talk about yourself. Like, we're a book club that's currently reading startup books. That's still sort of about you and what you're doing as a business and a book club, as opposed to speaking to your consumer first. That's a mistake a lot of people make on headlines on homepages. It's a mistake a lot of people make on about pages. Is they want to talk about themselves and their process and why they're different or cool, but really you should always talk to your consumer first. Like, okay, if someone wants to read books on startups, what are they thinking or feeling? What place are they in their life? What stage are they at their business? What might they be worried about? What might be something that's causing them pain, fear, frustration right now? And how are you gonna, how is the fact that you're reading startup books going to solve that for them? So I think you really need to speak to that element first, and then you can say, well, good news, we're reading all about that here with our startup books. I mean, obviously I'd write something, if I was taking time, I'd write something better than that, but I think like talk to them before you talk about yourself.
That's such a good point. I was just at a conference earlier this year, and one of the speakers was a professional copywriter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like the topic of her talk was like 7 magic words you can use in all your copy. Like you leave here knowing nothing else, just like cheat, use these magic words. You don't even need to know why. And one of them was the word you. And it was just like literally talk to your customers and say you instead of saying me or I or we all the time, because someone really knows what you're up to. They care about themselves. And so if you can talk about what
100%.
they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, fully agree.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Callum, we have ripped apart your headline. Hope you're hope you're happy. There's a lot
Sorry.
of questions here about your journey, Allie, and your
Yeah.
particular business. Let me see if I can find a good one to start with. So Chris Che asks, Allie, how did you reach your initial first 5 customers with your agency?
So we were fortunate in that we were both entrepreneurs, so we already had businesses with pretty robust client list and client contacts. How we converted those people to our agency is we started to set out a really fun drip email campaign, getting people excited about this new thing we were doing, and it was very wild and very funny, and it was the whole thesis of it was like a value add. So every email in the drip series was like a give to the audience, a give to the audience, and give to the audience. And then we did a fun webinar. I'm trying to remember, I guess it's been a while now. We did a webinar where we just talked about what like this new idea we had, and then kind of threw the net out and said, hey, these are the people we've already worked with or that had been on our list for a while. So they were warm, they weren't warm or hot, they weren't a cold list. And then basically then put a very soft ask out. It wasn't a hard sell. It wasn't like 24 hours of a special. Like, I hate that shit. That's not our style. It was just like, hey, this is this new concept we came up with. We think it works. If you want to be our guinea pig and let us prove it to you, like, we're game. And like, that was kind of the nature of it. I'm not a hard sell person. I don't really like those tactics. I think people can smell it a mile away and they can see right through it. I don't like scarcity as a tool. In particular, I think it does work, but it's not something I'm really geeked about. So yeah, it was just like a fun drip campaign to get people jazzed about what we were doing. And so, yeah, people were already either familiar with myself or Lindsay to some degree. And we did a lot of FaceTime for the initial projects, just so people were seeing us. I think that's a lost art. A lot of people, that's why I wanted to do a video AMA, is because I think being on video and seeing someone, it's just a wonderful humanizing experience. People are kinder, people are nicer, they're more affable, they're easier to work with than like if you're behind a screen and you're behind text and email all the time. So we just did a lot of FaceTime with these, our clients, just so they had a really good experience and they felt really engaged and involved. So
it's like people in cars. If you're like on the sidewalk and you bump into someone, you're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, how's your day?
yeah,
Someone's in like a car, and and someone's like slightly slow walking across the crosswalk, they're angry. So I
total
think it's the
a-hole.
same with
Yeah.
like online forums versus video, etc.
Oh my
Although
God.
we're indie hackers, Allie. We're a bunch of nerds, so we don't want to talk to anybody. We like text. Um, the other thing you're talking about that keeps ringing a bell in my head is, I don't know if you've read this book Influence, but it's a book about basically human psychology and like what are the 5 or 6 factors that we find most influential. And you've named 2 or 3 of them just incidentally. Like you just named scarcity, which is a really big one, but it's more of a negative one, right? It's kind of like instill fear of missing out on people, which is a very unpleasant
Yeah.
thing, even though it works very well. But another one you mentioned that was really big in the book, and my favorite chapter in the book, it's called Commitment and Consistency. And the book talks all about how we constantly strive to be consistent because, like you said, we trust people who are consistent. And if you as a brand are inconsistent, if there's no continuity in your product and your marketing, et cetera, then people can kind of smell it out. It's like kind of wired into us as people. And the book makes kind of the same point that like we're always striving to be consistent, and we do all sorts of things to prove that we're consistent to the things that we've committed to earlier on. So it's pretty
Yeah.
fascinating to see all your marketing stuff lines up with that.
I love that. What are some, do you remember any of the other points?
Yeah, let me see if I can from memory. It's like reciprocation. Somebody does something for us, they want you want to do something back for them just naturally.
Yeah.
Liking, if you like somebody, you're much more likely to buy from them,
Mhm.
to cooperate with them just because you like them.
Yeah.
Authority, it's a negative one. If you're in any sort of position of authority, people will sort of listen to what you say, even if it's kind of ridiculous.
What
There's
was it positioned as negative, or was it authority?
No, it wasn't. So he gives examples for all of these. So like for authority, he has like a few experiments that they talked about that were all pretty negative, like people doing
Oh.
very negative things because there's authority. But like presumably you can do it from a position of good. If you're a leader and like you're not telling people to do awful things, like they're more
Yeah.
likely to listen to you because you're in a leadership authoritative position. How many is that? 4?
Was that
What
5
else?
different?
There's like social proof is a big one. People just do things that other people are doing. It's okay to do something if someone else is doing it, which I think really applies to what you're talking about, because a lot of what you're talking about is stand out, right? Like do things differently than what someone else is doing. And the reason why you have to tell people that, and the reason it's really hard, is because like as a founder, you don't, it's scary to stand out. You just want to do the safe thing and have the headline that everyone else has and have the same
Yeah.
website design everyone else has, because then it's super safe. But like that's the opposite of what gets people's attention. So
Yeah.
um,
I have a theory. You saying that is aligns with my theory of why I think most people buy not most people, that was dramatic. A lot of people buy followers on
Yeah.
Instagram because at some point they're bluffing their way to have a certain follower count until people go, oh, they got 10,000, 15,000. Maybe I should actually follow them.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's the people who talk about their sold out conferences, 3 tickets left, 2 tickets left, 1 ticket left.
Social proof.
And so you're like bullshitting your way till you fill a room, and then eventually at some point you do, because enough people believed in your bullshit and that now they're actually showing up. I don't
social proof and scarcity combined.
Yeah, I don't recommend that strategy at all. I just feel like I observe it a lot and I like laugh because I'm like, well, and people buy it. People are buying into it.
Yeah. So your approach, like humor, fun, is, I would say, it aligns a lot with getting people to like you, relate to you, etc. Like consistency, like you're talking about being consistent. Maybe social proof a little bit. Like if you're using jokes or using humor that everybody can sort of, you kind of, like, I don't know if you've seen the Wendy's Twitter account. They have a hilarious Twitter account.
So good.
And it's like, whoever's running that account, it's like, I don't know, they're my people. Like, I understand them. And it's like,
I hope Wendy's never loses that person, because it has to be a singular
it has to be,
who's just a savage.
Yeah. They're hilarious.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like I left one of the things out. There's definitely one more influential property I left out, but it's cool to see how it aligns.
Yeah, I'll have to check that book out.
You should. It's one of my favorite. I love psychology books, and it's one of my favorites of all time.
Okay, good. I'm a big fan too, so that's great.
So we've got a couple more questions about your business. Okay. This one comes from Louis Swiss. He said, Allie, you mentioned podcasting. I happened to launch a podcast for my business last week. My aim is to build my audience, to provide value to users, and build trust and drive leads to my product. What are some of the higher impact growth or content things that I could be doing with my podcast to achieve these goals?
Yeah. So myself and my business partner, Lindsay, we started a very weird, very silly podcast 2.5 years ago because we had an idea that we thought would be very different and unique and memorable. So 2.5 years ago, we had an idea to start a podcast. It had a different name back then, where we read erotic Harry Potter fan fiction and made comedic commentary. It is now went from the name was Potterotica. We have now turned it into, it's now called Fangasm, where we have now expanded beyond Harry Potter and we read Game of Thrones, fan fiction, The Office. We're going to do Marvel, the whole shebang. When we started it, so I'm telling you this to answer, his question. When we started it, we didn't just start it willy-nilly, and we didn't just start it because we thought like, oh, let's start a podcast. We started it because we were looking around we were just ideating creative concepts, and we came across fan fiction. I'd never read it. We both liked Harry Potter. We had never read fan fiction. And we found that there was hundreds of thousands of stories on various forums. They were still being actively written. People were actively engaged, but there was no one out there reading it in podcast format. So we said, there is definitely a need. There is definitely an interest. There is a robust fandom. There are people who are ride or die diehards. So we can fill this need, and we think it'd be a riot and so much fun to do. So I think the first thing you have to ask yourself is, whatever you're creating in terms of a podcast, is it filling a need of some sort? Because there are so many marketing podcasts out there. There's so many business podcasts. There's so many, psychology-based, lifestyle, Q&A, like all that. Like, is there something that you're doing that you're going to talk about that is going to be memorable? It is going to be engaging or interesting or solve a problem that your audience is not yet having solved. So I think that's the first one. What we did is, when we were coming on the map, so first of all, we had an idea that we thought was a bit fresh and different. We did a big PR blitz. So we are good writers, obviously, that's what we do for a living. And so we decided, let's write really funny press releases. And let's blast them out to all the publications we would die if we got into. BuzzFeed, MTV, Huffington Post. And we had 4 different pitches. So we'd send out like 1 week, wait a week, 1 week, wait a week. And we got a ton of traction and a ton of hits. And we got a lot of press right out the gate. About the first 6 months in, because of these press releases we were sending out. And again, we didn't pay anyone to do it. We were just writing our own and just targeting the right folks. And that was a way to generate buzz. A third thing we did that I think was really beneficial for us is we immediately started a private Facebook group and really encouraged people to go there and engage. And we spent our time in there too. So people know, not only did these people feel like they were part of a podcast, they felt like they were part of like a community, like similar to what you guys do at Indie Hackers. It's like you have a community here, and people really desire that and they really crave that. And what made ours so, I guess, a bit different is like it was this weird intersection of like nostalgia, comedy, sex. And it was a very safe space for all of it. Our group is now probably 4,000 people. We have like 14 spinoff groups. It's like gone bonkers, but we set really strong guidelines in our group. We were really engaged and involved. Like, you have to be respectful. You have to be kind. This is not a place for bullshit. This isn't a place for criticism. Like, this is a place to have fun and play with each other rather. And like, it just opened up this opportunity for people to like engage in this thing and have dialogue in this thing where they knew it was going to be safe, fun, and comfortable. So those are kind of three big things we did. We had a unique idea, we pitched it out to press, and we built a community. And I think those are the three things that really gave us traction. And
Cool.
also our stuff is episodic, and it's not, our content doesn't expire. So we're not like reporting on news. So like you can go back and listen to season 1 from 2.5 years ago, and it's just as relevant as it is today. So that was an important thing for us, is we didn't want our content to become outdated or expire. We wanted it to have shelf life.
It's good tips. Podcasts are tough. I mean, I've got a podcast as well. You're going to be on it pretty soon.
Yeah.
Your episode edited. It's interesting because it's very tempting to use your podcast as a marketing channel for something else that you're building. But then you find yourself often in the situation where like, well, how do I market my podcast? And so you're trying to grow your growth channel, and it's not always as easy as it seems. For me with Indie Hackers, the podcast is something that I created after the website was already working, after I already found a particular niche. And like, I found it much easier to iterate on blog posts than I think I would have found to iterate on, live podcast episodes. Just requires scheduling a guest and recording it and editing it, and hours and hours of work. So I think a lot of the things you said are really cool. Like, I've never done any PR press releases for the podcast. I've never emailed a bunch of news agencies to try to get, more listeners, but I think that stuff's super helpful.
Yeah, I think you do I think you're just a really, I said this to you, but when we talked before, is you're a really good interviewer, and you have like a very warm presence, which I think is so nice. Aww. And I think that, it's interview style is a lot of work. It is. I mean, we're fortunate that our podcast is, we go into a studio and we record episodes of a story. So we are on our own schedule, on our own time, where, I mean, there's a lot of factors at play. So I commend you. I think you've done it well. So congrats.
So we're back to Callum now. I said I was going to stop reading Callum's questions, but we just asked so many. I've got to come back. He has one relevant to your career and your business. He says, Allie, what has been your biggest mistake in your marketing career that you can safely admit to?
I'm
not redact names.
No, I'm trying to think. I think the big mistake we made initially is, this is going to sound, how do I frame this in a way that, I think we put too much onus on our clients to need to understand more than what they maybe were capable of or needed to have responsibility for. So like, let me give like an example. Like when we would deliver like business names, for example, we'd have the name, we'd have like a couple sentences explaining like why we picked the name, blah, blah, blah. In my mind, that would have been enough, but I'm also looking through the lens of someone who does this every day, and I'm a creative. And so I know what I know. And I think when we really started to kick our business in high gear and have better client experiences and better relationships is when we assumed our client didn't know anything. And I don't mean that as putting the blame on them. I mean it as like, so we developed a process where they didn't have to think about anything, that they really could just receive the creative and receive the deliverables. And we explained everything down to minutia detail so that they could just turn all those parts of their brain off and just really soak into the creative and really experience it and really be able to just be there with it, as opposed to having to like think how we think or get to where we got. I know I'm not really.
No, that makes perfect sense.
But yeah, I think like that's a thing that that was a mistake in the beginning, is putting and it wasn't intentional, but like we just forgot that we had to teach more than we thought we did. Not even just because it's humor fun centric, just the idea of like when you're putting something new out into the world and you're handing something back to a client, like they are not going to know your process or your perspective or your ideas in the way that you will. So you just have to really make sure that they feel comfortable in their process. And so that's something I think we do really, really well now. We never did terribly, but like have definitely come a long way.
It's a ye old curse of knowledge. It's tough. That's all of us. We always like are deep in whatever we're doing, and it's easy to underestimate like how hard it is for someone else to sort of absorb the knowledge that we have.
Yeah.
Or how much like they just don't really care, they go on about their day. They don't want to know. They don't want to have to learn anything.
Part of it too. I mean, it's like the most cliche thing when you assume you make an ass out of you and me. I mean, it's like that times 100. It's like you can't assume people know, care, and feel a way that you feel. You have to just assume that they don't feel, know, or care about any of it, and that's okay. They don't have to. That's your job.
And it goes further than you might think. Like for me, my big one with Indie Hackers is I send you a welcome email when you join, and I'm like, hey, it's like super friendly and personal, and like you can reply to me when you get the welcome email, and I'll reply. And like the most common response that I get back to my welcome email is people basically saying like, oh, like, I have this question that I've always wanted to ask another founder, and here's the question. And it's like, you just signed up for an online community of founders, the point of which is to go there and post a question for other founders. So I'm always redirecting people, and it's just like, that's not anyone else's fault. It's just me sort of underestimating, like, like I know exactly what Indie Hackers is for, but even someone who just signed up for it might not recognize that like they can use it in this way.
Yeah. So, maybe you should address that in your welcome email in a fun, cheeky way.
I'll just put
hey, one of the most common questions I get is X. Cool thing about that question is it's been asked so many times in X forum. Pop over there and ask
it out. Yeah.
Like that's a fun way to like.
I'm gonna get out of here and just edit my welcome email right now.
Good.
Well, we've been going for an hour. I've taken up plenty of your time, and we are, I think, right at the end of questions. We had someone pop in at the very end who just asked a question 17 minutes ago. So I'll ask his. His name is too many consonants. I can't pronounce it. Okay, there we go. Emre. He says, thanks for this office hours. Can I ask something? Allie, do you think that knowing your audience is necessary for making improvements to your product, or is it more for knowing where to advertise, I guess, who to ask? So I guess my interpretation of his question is, how crucial is it to know who your audience is, and like where does that play more of a role, like crafting your product or advertising and marketing?
I mean, I feel like both. I feel like who are you crafting it for if you don't know who your audience is? Like, how do you know you're meeting a need? How do you know you're giving people what they want if you don't know who the people are? How do you know you're on target, off target? So I think it's really important from crafting your product and service, because it should be tailored. I mean, you're going to tailor it, as you evolve as a business, you're going to be able to tailor it further to an audience as you start to understand and know them more. From a marketing perspective too, yeah, of course. I mean, I think it's equally as important is that in order to get your product or service in the right people's hands, you have to know where those people are spending time. Like, where are they engaging? How do they like to consume information? Where are they exploring and receiving brand messages? So yeah, I think it's important in all places. I think, and I don't think this question asker is, this isn't directed to this individual, but I think a lot of people just want to be lazy with their businesses, and you just can't be. You just can't.
Nope.
People who are successful and people who you're familiar with, and people who their business or their product is a household name, they work their ass off to make it that way. Success isn't an accident. It's hard work, and you have to be willing to put time in effort and resources into your business. And if you're not good at something, that's okay. There are plenty of people of expertise outside of domains that you may be skilled at. Maybe there's someone who's really good at understanding audience segmentation and targeting and business infrastructure, whatever those components are. Bring those people in, because it's all for naught if it's not done well.
Agreed on all counts. Should you know your audience for your product or your advertising? Yes, both.
Yeah.
And I think one of the hard things is that, like, and I deal with this a lot running Indie Hackers. I'm constantly showcasing founder stories. There's thousands of success stories out there. Like every now and then, like some people do get lucky. They don't put in a lot of work. They just build the thing they want, and it turns out a million other people want it, and they didn't do any of the research. But like that's not necessarily a good example to learn by, because you don't really want to play the lottery. You want to increase your chances as much as you can. And that means doing the work to figure out who you're targeting.
Yeah. And I think that is such a unicorn story, that like that's not the average everyday
No, not at all.
story.
Those are the ones that spread, though. Those are the ones everyone gloms onto.
Everyone,
Because who doesn't want to start $1 million business in a week with no research and no
of
work?
course. But if that's your expectation going into it, like,
Yeah.
So it's going to be a sad entrepreneurial journey.
Well, listen, Allie, I'm excited for your podcast episode to come out whenever I finish editing it. This is my podcast week, so we'll definitely get it edited.
Awesome.
And you will be on the air in front of many thousands of indie hackers. I appreciate you taking the time to come and do this video AMA. It went really well. I'm glad you suggested it.
Oh my God, I love it. This is so fun. It's just nice to be able to see you and hang this way. I thought it'd be better than just typing back answers.
That's much better. So we'll have to do this again sometime. Anyway, can you tell listeners where they can go to find out more about you, about Obedient, and what you're working on?
Yeah. So obedientagency.com. You can find us at Obedient Agency anywhere on the internet. And then I am Allie LeFevere, ALLIE LEFEVERE, anywhere on the internet.
All right. Thanks so much, Allie.
Thank you.